All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a fascinating and honestly pretty intense topic, the June 2026 inflection point in Ukraine. And we're not just talking about temporary territory shifts or typical battlefield maneuvers. We are looking at a fundamental, absolute transformation where machines are rapidly and permanently replacing human beings on the front line. Picture this, because the visceral reality on the ground is terrifying. It's June 2026. A knee-high robot is rolling silently through a blown-out tree line, and it is carrying a massive, lethal, explosive payload. The enemy forces holding that trench line have absolutely no idea it's even there, until it is literally 10 meters away. Why? Because there's zero engine noise. Think about it. On a traditional battlefield, the whine of a motor or the high-pitched buzz of a drone buys you this crucial 2 to 3 second window to dive for cover. This new machinery? It deletes that warning window entirely. The Russian troops facing these things actually came up with a pretty grim nickname for them, born out of pure panic and helplessness. They call it the silent death. Because when you strip away a soldier's ability to use their hearing as an early warning system, these ground robots can just infiltrate completely undetected. By the time someone actually hears the tread of this machine, they're already well inside its blast radius. There is no time to react, period. Now, when you look at the math behind this shift, it is absolutely staggering. Let's look at the data from the Ukrainian assault unit designated NC-13. Across 164 separate operations, traditional infantry tactics would have required around 2,300 soldiers, and statistically, you'd be expecting over 1,000 dead or wounded men. But with robot assaults, 0 human casualties. They saved roughly 1,000 human lives in just one unit, over one operational period. With 22,000 unmanned missions conducted since the start of 2026, the data is totally clear. Robots aren't just filling in for troops, they are vastly outperforming them on a live, highly contested battlefield. So, how did we actually get here? Well, it all goes back to a major technology bottleneck. Early on, those traditional FPV drones were incredibly successful, right? But they relied completely on a live radio feed and GPS. Once Russian forces adapted by flooding the zone with electronic warfare or EW jammers, things got bad. Up to 80% of traditional drone strikes were failing in the final critical seconds of flight. They just drop out of the sky. But the new AI-enhanced drones bypass this completely. They use visual navigation and onboard image recognition, meaning they can operate with zero radio contact. And they achieve this through a massive software breakthrough that we call terminal autonomy. Basically, this means you give a drone enough onboard intelligence and visual processing power to finish its mission entirely on its own, right after a human points it at the target. They didn't solve the electronic warfare jamming problem by inventing some crazy new physical weapon. They solved it by simply telling the drone to stop listening to outside signals during its final approach. Because, well, you can't jam a drone that isn't listening to anything. That one software decision led to some unbelievable real-world results. We're talking a massive jump in mission success rates. They went from a really dismal 10 to 20% hit rate for traditional FPVs, all the way up to an astonishing 70 to 80% for the AI-assisted ones. Think about what a 3 to 4-fold improvement does for an outnumbered military. It completely flips the mathematical equation of attrition, because every drone that actually hits its target is one you don't have to build twice, and that's a human pilot you didn't have to expose to artillery fire. Okay, so who is actually architecting this shift? Enter Mikhailo Fedorov. He is the 35-year-old former Facebook ad executive who is now the defense minister of Ukraine. He comes from a completely non-traditional background, never served a day in uniform. And because of that, he looks at this war exactly the way a Silicon Valley founder looks at a legacy industry that is totally ripe for disruption. He's got this incredibly clear, futurist perspective. To quote him directly, warfare can be remade by offloading the fighting onto machines. He's literally bringing tech startup culture right into the defense ministry. We're talking data analysts walking around in sweatshirts, ping pong tables in the hallways, the whole shebang. But he views this incredibly seriously, comparing this rise in AI deterrence to the dawn of the nuclear age, a world where algorithmic superiority dictates the global order, not just who has the most warheads. And he's translated that philosophy into a very concrete 3-pillar blueprint: air, land, and economy. Step 1, the air. Intercept 95% of incoming Russian drones and missiles. Step 2, land. And this is a brutal metric. Drive Russian casualties up to over 50,000 per month. And step 3, the economy. Consistently strike the oil export terminals that actually fund the Russian war machine. This is not your grandfather's defense plan. This is a cold, calculated strategy of mathematical attrition built specifically to grind down a million-man army. But you might be wondering, what does Silicon Valley logic actually look like when it hits the dirt in Ukraine? Well, it looks like garage-built weapons, hastily soldered together. It's spools of fiber optic cable unwinding from the back of a drone, guiding it down a literal thread of glass just to completely ignore radio jamming. It's projects like Avenger Labs, ingesting millions of annotated battlefield videos to build out these massive AI training datasets. The real genius here isn't one silver bullet superweapon. It's the fact that Ukraine turned the entire war into an enormous data collection operation. They build cheaply, they lose freely, and they iterate their software way faster than their enemy can physically adapt. Now, to be completely objective here, this tech revolution is definitely causing some internal friction. You have this really stark contrast between Minister Fedorov's future's vision of these clean, empty, automated battlefields and the harsh reality faced by Ukraine's commander-in-chief, General Syrskyi. Syrskyi is dealing with muddy trenches, broken bodies, and traditional combined arms tactics. So there is an open power struggle happening. The military commanders, they love the tech, for sure, but they argue that the actual timeline for fully unmanned warfare is moving a whole lot slower in the mud than it is in Fedorov's speeches. But despite that pushback at the top, the sheer scale of production is skyrocketing toward an autonomous horizon. Ukraine is rapidly scaling up to a mind-blowing target of 7 million drones annually by the end of 2026. Just to put that into perspective, they produced around 2 million in 2024. That impending jump to 7 million, that is a monumental scaling effort that will completely, utterly saturate the front lines with these machines. And the way they actually operate those millions of drones, that's changing just as fast. Historically, operating these systems required a very strict 1-to-1 ratio. One highly skilled human pilot controlling one single machine. If the drone got jammed or if it crashed, that pilot had to rig up a new one and start all over again. It severely capped how many strikes could happen at any given moment. But now that AI is handling the most technically demanding phases of the flight, we are quickly approaching a terrifying new inflection point, 1 to 100. A single operator can now coordinate up to 100 drones simultaneously in a synchronized push. Just imagine the volume of that assault coming at you. When one person can launch 100 strikes at the exact same time, previous manpower disadvantages suddenly become mathematically irrelevant. You just cannot jam your way out of that kind of math. Now, we do have to ground all this tech enthusiasm in the harrowing human reality that is actually forcing this automation in the first place. This isn't happening just because it's cool tech. We're talking about soldiers trapped in dugouts for 11 months straight without rotation. Exhausted men having to walk 20 miles through mud just to reach safety, facing severe, crippling manpower shortages. The real engine driving this Silicon Valley revolution is exhausted, dying men, and a profound, absolute unwillingness to keep spending human lives in those trenches. Which brings us to an incredibly difficult, provocative final question. At what point does removing human judgment from the kill decision stop being a tactical advantage and start being something we simply lack the legal framework to govern? Right now, a human is still in the loop at the start of the mission. The pilot points it, the AI finishes it. But as Ukraine races toward full uninhibited autonomy just to save its soldiers, they are crossing lines that international law hasn't even begun to map out yet. The harsh reality of war isn't waiting for the ethics debate to catch up, and that is exactly what we all need to be paying very close attention to as this continues to accelerate.